Well, hello, hello, hello. What a treat, what a pleasure for my beautiful people, from all of my subscribers. I have Mr. Andrew Lownie coming to the channel. Amazing writer. I mean, I'm so thankful you're here.
Well, it's very nice to be here.
So, Andrew, I know you are an incredible writer. Trader King is one of my favorite books. And you also talked about the Mountbattens. And I haven't read that one, but I did read the Trader King. And I know you have a book, you're cooking a book on Andrew. Is that right?
Yes, it's the joint biography of Andrew and Fergie. So I'm always interested to hear from anyone who's met them. And it's the third of the trilogy of books I'm doing on royal marriages. So the first was on the Mountbattens and their open marriage. The second was Trader King and on the great love story of the 20th century, or was it? And the third is on the happiest divorced couple ever, or are they?
I have to tell you something because this always gets me. I in my channel, I people say, "Why does people think that Meghan Markle has this, like this dark secrets over the royal family, and this is why they let her get away with so much and blah blah blah." And my argument has always been that they can't call her out on the things that she's doing because this has been going on for a long time, like commercialization of the titles. We have the Windsors as the Duke of Windsor. I mean, they're the original the original, like they were
Well,
pimping up their
there's good
title.
parallels between the Windsors and the Sussexes. It's the son who basically walked away from his public duties, married the American divorcee, betrayed his family, tried to commercialize his royal position, was thrust into exile, had complaints about security, took the press to court, tried to suppress some books, tried to encourage other writers. So there are a lot of parallels there. But you're absolutely right. One of the problems of the royal family is the people who marry into it. They have to kind of keep them on side. It's better to have them inside the tent than outside. And so Fergie and Meghan Markle and others, because they know a lot of the secrets, they have to sort of embrace them when it will be in their interest to distance themselves from them. And you've got to remember this is a family, and the members of the family they may not like, but they kind of have to be nice to them because their brother is married to them or their son or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, I'm not a Fergie fan. I don't believe in. And one of the major, every time I talk about her, and because for example, I call out Charles a lot because I do believe he has a dark history, but for some reason people are they don't like to hear what he's done in the past. It's like, oh, that's in the past, and they like to trash Meghan Markle, which is fine. I call her out too, but it's like Fergie, I could never tolerate. I don't understand why this woman is allowed to live at Royal Lodge without paying rent. She's basically on very expensive welfare. And she's been there forever. And one of the defenses that people say to me about her, well, she's never trashed the queen. And I'm like, wait a minute, she has. She went on Oprah and said that the queen was cheap, that she made her turn off the lights, that it was cold in the rooms. I mean, it's just that the internet didn't exist back then. But what do you think of Fergie? Why is she still at the Royal Lodge? And why is she coming back?
Well, I mean, I think she's very good at worming her way into the sort of bosom of the family. She's very close to Andrew. He's her great protector. I think people feel she has been loyal to Andrew and defends him, which a lot of people don't do. So I think she keeps being given breaks to come back in, and clearly her whole raison d'être is to be a member of the royal family. That's how she commercializes all her activities. Clearly a number of members of the family are not so keen on her. Prince William, for one, Prince Edward. And Charles has had his run-ins with her in the past. I mean, it's been a slightly odd relationship because at one point he put her up to Diana as a good example. But she's there, and there's not much they can do. Philip is now dead, and who was one of the great people who was trying to separate her from her son because his son really couldn't move on in his life while Fergie was there. She was always basically preventing him from having new girlfriends. But you're absolutely right. Fergie has criticized the royal family. She's played the press very cleverly, partly sometimes to help her with her divorce settlement, sometimes in order to get sympathy. sometimes to cover up some of the things that she's been doing. But you're right, she would moan every Christmas that she was at Sandringham, but in Wood Farm rather than at the big house. But not many divorced women are allowed to come to Christmas. And she was able to bring her family, and the Queen would come and see her on Boxing Day. Andrew, the children were staying with her. It wasn't even that they were up at the big house. So a lot of the stuff that she says is not entirely true. And I'm afraid people are taken in by her, particularly in the States. And she goes on Oprah and she confesses she's going to change, and that was a different Sarah, and she's learned her lessons, and it's because her mother ran away when she was a child and she has low self-esteem. But she's been milking the system for 40 years. And, it's just one of those things.
I saw your interview with Andrew Gold, by the way. I was so glued to it. One of the things that you talked about, which I don't think very many people know, and I did kind of mention it, was that she was sued for $500,000 or 500,000 pounds because she thought there was a gift. I mean, can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, no, she's constantly had claims against her in the High Court for not paying her bills. The 500,000 was when she was caught in a sting operation by the News of the World, which was a British tabloid, trying to sell access to Andrew. And she took a down payment of $40,000. And in return, she said she would give him access to Andrew, who at that point was a special trade representative representing British industry. And the worry is that clearly she undermined his role as an independent trade representative. But there is a worry that the two of them have been working hand in glove, exploiting their position, their royal position, in order to make money for themselves. And one of the problems I've had writing the book is the documents, which, for example, would show us who was accompanying him, Andrew, on a lot of his foreign trips, are not being released. And you have to ask why, as a representative of the British government, not as a royal, this material, which should be released after 20 years, has not been made available. But that's been the case, even with the Epstein case, that the police protection officer who wanted to see the records for the logs for Buckingham Palace for that night, because he thinks that they went back to Buckingham Palace on that night, was told that those logs had been destroyed. Now, that evidence would confirm either Andrew's innocence, that he wasn't there on that night, or his guilt, that he wasn't down at Sunninghill. So there's, I'm afraid, a huge cover-up that's going on to protect Andrew. And he's been allowed to get away with a lot of stuff that really anyone else wouldn't have been able to get away with, because he's a member of the royal family. And there's still this huge reverence and deference for the royal family. The argument is that the dignity of the monarchy can only be protected by keeping quiet about these things. But I would argue the dignity of the monarchy happens by them behaving in a dignified way and not abusing their position.
Oh my God, Andrew, I am a monarchist. I'm not a royalist. But you just beautifully, I'm so thankful you speak English as your first language, because you have just basically in one sentence said what I've been saying all along. You wouldn't need to do cover up if people behaved properly.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, I'm a monarchist too, and I think it is the best system, the least worst system. But they have to behave properly, in return for the position they have, the money that's spent on them, particularly on security, the large palaces they live in, etc. They have to operate as public servants and not abuse that position. And I don't think you get a free pass for behaving badly just because you're a royal. The rogue royals, the Duke of Windsors, the Harrys, the Prince Andrews, let the side down, the ones that do a good job, like the Prince and Princess of Wales, Princess Anne, Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. They do a good job. I mean, you don't have scandals around them. But I'm afraid there are these rogue royals who are completely playing the system because they know that there's very little scrutiny and accountability.
Yeah, and it's almost like this saying, you can spend 30 years building your reputation and it will take you 2 seconds to throw it out the window. Like for example, that picture that Princess of Wales, that everybody flagged. I mean, my argument with that is that Meghan Markle photoshops everything. I mean, there's pictures even without fingers and stuff that she's posted. But why do you think there was such uproar about that picture, and she was so horribly criticized for it? I mean, why do you think that was? Like, people were saying, oh, she betrayed everybody.
I think the Kate thing was unfortunate. I mean, that was bad advice. Normally they are pretty. I mean, they are very controlling, the royal family. It's a brand. They're trying to, to preserve the brand. They don't want criticism. But particularly the Princess and Princess of Wales are pretty good at projecting the happy family. They think they get the balance right between accountability and transparency and being a very ordinary family and retaining some mystique and dignity. I think the problem there was that she wasn't appearing. No one was explaining what was going on. There were a series of other events going on, and people put two and two together and got seven. And if she had just come forward, I think, a little bit sooner and made the sort of statement that she made when she was interviewed, then I think the speculation wouldn't have taken place. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just showing people here that this is your podcast because now you have a podcast, right? For them to go check it out, subscribe, like. I have to subscribe myself. I just put it up. I'm sorry about that.
Good.
But
Thank you.
and also the yes, I'm going to start listening to it because I love all the stuff that you're talking about. But I wanted to ask you. Well, there's so much I wanted to. I wish you were my encyclopedia right next home. But what is the Andrew and Epstein thing over, or do you think there's going to be more to it?
No, I don't think it's over, and I think that's why he had to retire from public life, because no one was knew what might be coming up. There's still depositions which are being released. There clearly were a lot of trials that went on. There are a lot of people who signed NDAs, and I think some of those NDAs may no longer be effective. So I think there's still quite a lot to come out. There's, I think, an appeal in Ghislaine Maxwell's case, and will she begin to squeal? So no, I think the fat lady hasn't sung yet.
So then why? Because the way I look at it, for example, they allowed them to do the Christmas walk, if I remember correctly, and now the Easter thing, and then the King Constantine thing. Do you think that they're bringing them slowly back? And Fergie was, I mean, I've never seen a clown in my life look like that. Her face, like
she's gurning away.
Justified?
Well, I think there are two things here. One is that it's always very difficult to get the balance between the public lives and the private lives, and so private events, which might be a funeral for a distant relative, or them all going to church together when they've been staying at Sandringham, that possibly is okay. But I think what they're trying to do the whole time is just to test the waters, and then they get a reaction, and then they back off. And also, you've got to remember that sometimes people are being, pushed. She's very, very. Fergie doesn't let go. She's very pushy, and her husband is ex-husband is very pushy, and so sometimes it's easier for a quiet life. You've got to remember that the king has been ill. He doesn't want stress. It was one of the problems with the Queen before she died. The last thing she wanted was to have more stress, and so she gave in a lot to Andrew, who is very pushy, particularly about protecting his wife and finding jobs for his daughters. And I think that'll be the new debate, not just whether he leaves Royal Lodge, but also will there be a role for his two daughters, particularly for Princess Beatrice. He's already had fights with Charles about the removal of their security, because they're clearly very low security risks, and all that was happening were policemen were giving them lifts out of nightclubs, and also whether they're going to appear on the balcony. But Andrew is very concerned with protocol, and with he thinks he's basically ordained, as a prince of the blood, and so his daughters, and they deserve deference and respect. The problem is they haven't in the course of their lives really earned that, and that's what the new monarchy needs: slimmed down monarchy in which they earn respect rather than it just being given to them because they're royals.
Yeah, that I was thinking, because one thing has always bothered me, that people come to the defense of Fergie when I said that this woman should have been put in jail when she was caught selling access for cash, right? Because that is a criminal offense, period. She was caught red-handed. So I remember at the time she came out and said, well, it was a sting operation. I didn't really do it. But I remember at the time I said, wait a minute. The word got around that you were doing it. That's why they were able to set you up, because It's like when you have a drug dealer, they know that he's a drug dealer and he's selling drugs, but they're not able to catch him. She was doing it. And I watched the video, which I'm sure you did too. She looked right at ease. Just give me the 40,000. It looks like something she'd done repeatedly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I know that the news of the world were tipped off that this was going on, and that's why they set up the sting. And the idea that Andrew knew nothing about it, again, is ridiculous. And they're on the phone 5 times a day. They don't do anything without talking to each other. And she did indeed talked in part of the transcript of that. She called him Billy. That, if you do this, I can deliver Billy, and this is what Billy asked for £500,000. So there's always a sort of cutout. There's always a lightning conductor, because there've been a whole series of these scandals, not just with Fergie, but Prince Michael of Kent was also caught, saying he was a friend of Putin and could arrange things in Russia. And his sort of friend was basically took the flak. So you're absolutely right. And there've been a whole series of cases with Fergie being caught and Andrew with money in their bank accounts, which they can't account for. It's a famous case with Salman Turk, which is still going on.
Oh, yeah.
The book delineates a lot of these cases where there are unexplained sums going into their bank accounts, and you have to wonder what it's for. And she works very openly as a brand ambassador for various, particularly southeastern businessmen who make a point of saying that she works for them. And there are pictures of her and the daughters all over the office with him. And she is lured in to get investors. So, this will all be in the book, which comes out next year. But it's the problem with the Yorks is not so much Epstein. It is the financial irregularities of the way they operate.
I mean, how did they afford to buy that ski lodge? That ski lodge was worth millions. Where did he get that? I mean, other than the shady, when they sold their house, the mansion that the Queen gave him for over £3 million, if I remember correctly, from one of his connections that he met in Kazakhstan or something like that, that they had that property for sale for the longest time. And then suddenly this billionaire from Kazakhstan, if I remember correctly, just bought it for over £3 million.
The sale of Sunninghill is that, Sunninghill was given to him as a wedding present. He spent years trying to sell it. He was trying to flog it around the Middle East as on his trips as a trade envoy. And it was eventually bought by a man that he was dealing with as a trade envoy, who was the son-in-law of the president of Kazakhstan. And he bought it. It was advertised for sale for £12 million. He bought it for £15 million. But the man from Kazakhstan had actually been told shortly beforehand that actually, because it was run down and didn't really have the wow factor, it had been empty for years. It was actually only really worth £7 million. So he paid a good £6 million more than it was worth. There were no other bidders. And time again, that people that he was dealing with, often dictators and very repressive regimes, he's found to have had a business relationship outside the relationship that he had as the trade envoy. And there are lots and lots of stories of him not staying at the British Embassy on these trade trips, going to hotels and meeting people or asking to meet people who are not connected with the trade drive. The purpose of the trip, which is being paid for by taxpayers, but with people that he feels might be useful to him. And one of his close associates, apart from Epstein, is a man called David Rowland, who set up a bank called the Bank Haviland, which specializes basically in lending money to people who can't get money otherwise, like dictators. And Haviland has paid off a lot of Fergie's debts. He's been taken on these trips. He's actually been briefed with secret information. And he and Andrew have even gone into business together with disguised bank accounts. So, there is a lot of things there, big questions that need to be asked about the way that Andrew has operated. And it's not just, it's how it looks. Even if it's completely innocent, it doesn't look fitting for the second son of the Queen, the brother of the King, to behaving in this way for personal gain using public position.
Yeah, it sounds like Harry. But I was going to ask you something that is, well, I wanted to talk to you about this because I saw in the interview that you talked to Andrew Gold that you said that in one of the trips, Andrew told the ambassador to get him a blonde girl. I mean, do you think that that's because he was used to Epstein doing that for him? That just give me a girl like that. I mean, the way he talks about women that are not of his class is like they're almost disposable. I mean, that is insane. I mean, that he I would be worried. How can he say that to an ambassador? I mean, did he really feel untouchable asking for something like that? What did the ambassador say to him?
Well, the ambassador said to him, "I'm not a pimp." Um, the
Or,
ambassadors, have complained behind the scenes, but the problem is if and complaints were passed back to Buckingham Palace, but nothing was done. But I know, talking to hotel staff at some of these places, that he was bringing in large numbers on an industrial scale. Sex workers were being brought into him, and indeed he was swapping his favorite girls with other mates of his, other particularly Middle Eastern royals. So he's just used a lot of women to throw themselves at him because he's a prince and they think it's a notch on their bedpost. And he has just got this idea that he's a sort of love god. But you're absolutely right. Epstein saw one of the vulnerabilities of Andrew was that he has this huge sex drive, and took advantage of that.
he does?
Yep, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't take drugs, but
Really?
he does have. People say he slept with over 1,000 women.
Who, Epstein or Andrew?
Andrew.
Oof. Oh my God. Oh my God. Do you think, having said all of this, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Do you think that a lot of the defense for Andrew has been, well, he didn't know what Epstein was doing. But if you're around those kinds of people, they don't really hide what they're doing. And there are a lot of, because I used to be a diplomat, and I've been around people who are incredibly wealthy. I'm not one of them, but I've been around. And I see how they behave when they throw parties. It's like they have no filter because they consider themselves that they're in a trust group. So they don't have any filters. For example, if for example, Bill Gates is not going to behave the same with Prince William, I hope, then he would with Andrew if they're in that dinner party in New York, like an intimate thing. So they have very degenerate tastes and all kinds of things. Do you think people say, oh, he didn't know, he's naive, he's honorable, that's why he flew to New York and all these girls are coming in and out of the mansion? Do you really think he did not know?
No, of course he knew. The house in New York and the house in Palm Beach was filled with pictures of naked women. There were lots of young girls wandering around. So I don't think there's any question that he knew. And in fact, time and time again, he's lied about his movements. In the Newsnight interview, he's been teased because, he claimed he didn't sweat when people provided lots of pictures of him sweating at nightclubs. He said that he couldn't have gone to London at that time, even though it was a children's party in the afternoon, and he was at the nightclub in the evening. Windsor and London are very, very close. But at so many occasions when he's made statements, or Buckingham Palace have made statements on his behalf, when he met Epstein, when he last saw Epstein, all of those have been proved to be untrue. And you don't go to break up with someone and go and stay 3 nights. But he was set up by Epstein. Epstein knew the press were out there. He set him up for the photo, which was basically an insurance policy for Epstein. And Epstein, had him by the short and curlies because Andrew needed to get that money for Fergie. That was part of the purpose of going there. And she got £15,000 towards paying off one of her member of her staff, and I think more would have been forthcoming. But there are lots of talk of tapes that were taken at Palm Beach and elsewhere, and those tapes have disappeared. And those tapes are of people having sex with some of these girls, and that must be the worry, that Andrew and others have been compromised and are on tape.
Oh my God. And also the York girls, because there's this infamous picture of Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine. I think it was Beatrice's 18th or 21st birthday or something like that.
18th.
I mean, and I've seen pictures of Eugenie Fergie, Beatrice with Harvey Weinstein, Uncle Harvey, and with their wives throughout the years. And one of the defense that people have, well, they were at public events and they only, of course they're going to get pictures. But I actually have sources that told me that they were actually very, very friendly with Harvey Weinstein and, all those people, and Ron Burkle, the owner of Soho House, which I want to ask you about. But do you think that the York girls wouldn't know that? Because I think that Beatrice was the one who helped Andrew on that infamous interview he gave.
Yes, she did, and he would take Beatrice on some of these trips paid for by the taxpayer. But we have to remember that Fergie was very close to Epstein. That friendship, I mean, she flew out with the girls to see Epstein in 1998. She actually was keen to come and stay on Little St. James's Island, though she never did in the end. So the relationship was pretty close with her, and there is a little network. You're absolutely right. The children were taken to see Peter Nygaard's house in the Bahamas. Peter Nygaard is up for charges for sexual assault, and they mixed with a lot of these people. The famous dinner party in December 2010, when the photo was taken of Epstein and Andrew in Central Park. The other people of that were Charlie Rose, who subsequently been accused of sexual offences against women, and Woody Allen. So these are the sort of people that they're mixing with, and so inevitably, I mean, the number of people who've gone to jail who were their great mates. I mean, one of the other things, we talked about Beatrice's 18th birthday, but on her 21st birthday, which was held in Spain, she was given a £20,000 bracelet as a present. Diamond bracelet, I think, by one of the people that Andrew was doing business on behalf of.
Mm-hmm. That is not good. So this is why I say people try to defend them, you know what? You're around these people. It's like when Harvey Weinstein finally was put in jail, then everybody in Hollywood came, oh, we knew. It was like, but nobody did anything about it. Because now everybody, when the shit hits the fan, everybody's pointing fingers. We didn't know. It's like this P. Diddy thing, right? That's happening right now with P. Diddy.
Well, he's a great friend of Fergie's.
Exactly. And I found pictures, but how do they, it's incredible. And this is one of the questions I want to ask you. Is it really hard for you to find sources to talk to you? Are they scared? And I know you face consequences. I think you were even sued or something like that. How do you don't have to tell me who your sources, but it must be difficult for you.
Well, a lot of people sign NDAs. And confidentiality agreements. A lot of people who want to stay within the circles even don't want to speak off the record. So, and a lot of people, particularly the diplomats, even though they have very strong feelings about what happened, don't want to undermine the monarchy. So yes, it is very difficult to get people to talk. I wasn't sued. What happened was I had a case with the Mountbattens where I got the Information Commissioner ruled that the private diaries of Dickie and Edwina Mountbatten should be released to me. They'd been bought with public funds to be open. And the government appealed that decision. And I was appealed against the regulator, the Information Commissioner, and I was joined to that action. So I wasn't sued, but I was forced, because the regulator didn't really do their job, to take on expensive lawyers to defend that, to make sure that these papers were released, which had after all been bought with millions of pounds of public monies to be open. So that's what happened there. I've always, all my stuff is very scrupulously researched and noted. It means you will know from Traitor King there are over 1,000 footnotes. So I'm very careful that everything is backed up, and if I can't verify it, it isn't put in. I have a lot of material that isn't in the books because I can't verify it, or for legal reasons it has to be taken out.
Oh, but for example, if a source wants to remain anonymous, do you still put it in there?
Yes, it's there as private information. But clearly, and that material is shown to lawyers for the publishers. This material is shown to the people for them to sign it off, so that the lawyers know that I'm just not making it up. But in the book itself, I cannot reveal the identity of some of the people.
Oh, okay. So it must be very, I'm sorry, you were allowed to have that information, but then the government try to stop you from the information that you were authorized. Am I understanding that correct? I think
Yes, you're not. No, you're not understanding it correctly. The case with the Mountbattens is that material was sold by the family, the private diaries and letters of the Mountbattens, to an archive in Britain, and it was bought with public monies to be open to scholars and anyone. And that material was not made available, was not opened. And I challenged that. And the regulator for information, freedom of information, supported me, said this material should be released. The government had inveigled their way into this, claiming that there was a ministerial direction that required this material to be closed. And for 4 years, I fought that ministerial direction, which no one has actually been able to produce. And that cost me quite a bit of money. They then dropped the ministerial direction, and that didn't come up at the hearing. But the result was that 33,000 pages of material was released, in fact, before the hearing, the biggest ever release of freedom of information material. And it turned out that all this material was completely innocent. The material that they kept closed for 10 years, spent millions buying and then millions trying to suppress, had nothing in it which could possibly be embarrassing to the royal family or the British government.
But why they are so afraid? I don't understand. Is it because because they cover up so much, do you think, and they don't go through what's really there, that they haven't,
exactly, they hadn't read it. They closed it without reading it. So it's the secrecy is a default position, and they just do it. And I think one of the problems is rich and powerful people can put pressure and try and shut things down. I mean, this was an archive which was freely sold by the family. If it had been bought by an American archive, it would have been opened immediately. But because it was bought by this archive that was basically prepared, though it's meant to be in favor of academic freedom, prepared to be supine towards the royal family, allowed the royal family to vet this material.
This is all incredible. It is quite sad. I really feel sad when I hear that, because I do like the monarchy. But when I hear stuff like that, it's kind of like, sometimes you wonder, why do we bother? I always say they should purge the House of Windsor. They really need to purge. I still don't get it. Why Fergie is still around. I understand that King Charles is sick and he doesn't want to have to deal with this. But this is just my opinion, Andrew, that by having them there, he has to deal with stuff because he has them around, instead of officially cutting them off and not having to deal with that anymore. I don't understand why it's happening.
The problem was when she was outside and she was cut off, and it was the Queen who said, "Look, you've got to divorce." Andrew told her he's got to divorce her because she's an embarrassment. The problem is that then she goes off and she's a loose cannon and she does even wilder things to earn money. And she threatens to write another book. And though she signed non-disclosure agreements as part of her divorce settlement, she would clearly make a lot more from writing a book than any settlement she's got. So that's the problem, trying to keep her on side when she knows a lot of the family secrets. So they're between a rock and a hard place. And she's played that for a long time. And in fact, stuff has been published which she has contributed to. She's contributed to books which have been quite critical of the royal family.
Yeah. This is why I said to people, she criticizes the royal family. I think she blackmails him. Like, you pretty much is a blackmail, that she's doing. Like, if you don't allow me to use the royal title, because she uses the royal title for everything. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to hear from Sarah Ferguson. I think they want to hear from Duchess of York, right?
Absolutely, and that's why she stays very close, and that's why she lives in Royal Lodge, as you say, without having to pay rent, because she can market her goods. She had something called the Duchess Collection at one point. That's what everyone, that's what gives her calling card, and it's the same with Harry and Meghan. If they were Mr. and Mrs. Mountbatten Windsor, no one would be interested.
That's what I want to add, the parallels of these two, because I was very upset when Mr. Valentine Lowe he published that thing about the bullying before Meghan and Harry did that thing with Oprah. And people came forth and talked about the bullying, and it was so obvious that the queen said that she was going to carry out an investigation, but that the findings were not going to be disclosed. And I'm like, why are they doing that? Because these employees are paid for with the public purse, right? Like, for example, their assistants and stuff like that, right?
Yes, I mean, they are paid by public press. I mean, I think what they didn't want to do was exacerbate the situation with Meghan and Harry. I mean, because the people who come out badly from the report are Harry and Meghan. I mean, it's very clear that they were bullying staff. There was a rapid turnover of staff, as there is a rapid turnover of staff for Fergie, and they just didn't want to make the situation worse by publishing this stuff. So, this is, the belief is that always, just keep the whole thing out of public view, and that's the way to deal with it.
But don't you think that with the internet, this is an animal that they can't control? Because before it was a printed press, and they had deals with the press and they could control it. But now anybody, you see a news, something happened, you take a picture, you post it on the internet, and it's a worldwide thing. Do you think that they're having a harder time to control what gets out in the news?
Yes, of course. I mean, we remember the stories of Prince Harry in Vegas when, someone whipped out a phone and photographed him with his strip poker or whatever he's playing. So, yeah, it is a real problem. And also, in the past, if it was a British paper, they could put out notices and stop them publishing or put some pressure on them. But when it's in effect citizen journalism, and when it's worldwide, then it's very, very difficult to suppress things. And once the story's out, the genie's out of the bottle. There's nothing much you can do. So that's why they have to behave better, because they no longer can get away with behaving badly and no one knowing.
And I wanted to ask you this: that Ron Burkle is the owner of Soho House. I know that Charles opened one of his clubs in the UK, right? And I know that Charles went to they went to Turkey, Istanbul, to the opening. They went to Turkey to do some official event, but then that weekend was also the opening of Soho House in Istanbul. And I know that Meghan Markle, this is in 2015. And I see that, for example, that Charles went to the Soho House for lunch after he became king. And Ron Burkle is very good friends with Sarah, with Fergie, with Andrew, with all of the royals. And I see that, for example, Meghan Markle lives in the Soho House pretty much. Don't you think that in Ron Burkle, from what I hear, could be the next Epstein in regards to dirty stuff? When you did your research for Andrew, for the book that you're going to publish, did Ron Burkle come out at all, or Soho House?
A little bit. I mean, I haven't pursued that because my focus is very much on his time as a trade envoy. But yes, certainly he pops up as one of the figures, because clearly Soho House is. Well, I mean, what happens is a lot of these people suck up to the royals. The royals like them because they give them freebies, and they're then compromised. They shouldn't be taking trips and on people's yachts and staying in for free in people's hotels, because it places them in a position of obligation. But I'm afraid they do swim with all sorts of people who are not very savory. And anyone who had any proper antennae, would just not get involved. You don't hear stories of the Prince and Princess of Wales doing that, or indeed Princess Anne, or the Queen and Prince Philip. Yeah. So I'm afraid there's some greedy royals who like getting the perks and think they can get away with it. But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of people that they shouldn't be mixing with, and we would be savvy enough not to get too close to.
Yeah, but in many ways. For example, I know people say, why does Meghan and Harry continue to behave like idiots or mix with these people and stuff like that? And then I look, and people ask me, don't you would think that they would have learned their lesson, and actually they should have advisors to weed these people out? Because to this day, Andrew, I still don't know how Meghan got that close to the royal family. Because had it been like 60 years ago, there was no way that a Meghan Markle, an individual like Meghan Markle, would have got near to anybody in the crown. But now it was very easy for her to have that close of an access. Is it because those barriers have been brought down, or the standards to hang around with the royals are lower? I mean, how can Meghan Markle have, or have happened to I mean, Fergie, she used to hang around the aristocratic circles, but Meghan Markle, how could she have happened to the royal family?
Well, I mean, the thing is, advisors are advisors, and they aren't always listened to. In fact, that is one of the big problems, that the royal family don't listen to often very highly experienced PR people. Andrew was told, for example, not to do the Newsnight interview. But I think the thing is, you can't interfere with people's private lives, and you can warn them. I mean, I'm sure that people were shown files on the background of people who are checked out. Fergie was checked out, and there were certain things there that were pretty disparaging about her, but it didn't prevent her being allowed to marry Andrew, because that was the woman he said he loved. So that is one of the problems. I mean, at one point he was warned off, Koo Stark, the actress, because
Oh,
she'd
I
appeared
remember
in
that.
porn films. But in some ways, he ended up with someone far less suitable with Fergie than he had if he had married Koo Stark.
That is absolutely true. And I wanted to ask you, how do you think that the royal family underestimated how nasty Meghan Markle could be, or the impact she would have? Or do you think they knew what she was about and they still thought that they could control her because she would be so grateful? I mean, what is your take on that? Because it seems like she blindsided all of them. It's like they didn't know about her.
No, I think certainly when I was interviewing people for my Mountbatten book, which was
Oh yeah.
2017, 2018, they were pretty critical of Meghan. They thought it was all going to end in tears. So I think they knew that it was dangerous, but I think Harry was pretty determined to marry her, and I mean, William, for example, told him to take his time. People tried to as subtly and diplomatically as possible warn him, but I don't think they had any illusions about her. But she is a very determined character, and she's very good, like Fergie, at playing the press, manipulating public opinion, particularly in the States. And so there wasn't much they could do. And in some ways, you have to slightly let them hang themselves. They haven't behaved. I mean, Harry and Meghan have not really got the public support that they could have had. They've been discredited by their own actions. And in some ways, maybe that's a better long-term solution than to tell someone, no, you can't get involved with her, because I'm afraid sometimes you have to, a bit like any marriage that you can see isn't going to be suitable, you have to let them learn from their mistakes.
No, I agree with you, but it's something that they used to vet them before, right? Like, for example, I always said it's too bad the queen didn't say, "Yes, Harry, I give you," because he needed the queen's permission, right? Because he was sixth in line. It's too bad the queen didn't say, "Yes, I give you permission, but you're going to marry her in 2019." I'm surprised that they married that quickly, because I mean, why I never understood the rush to marry her that quickly. And it's too bad that the queen didn't give him, like, yeah, you can marry her, but in 2019.
Well, I think, they were very, very much in love. I mean, she was very pushy. He felt very lonely, particularly, his brother was married, having children. He felt that his generation were having children. He felt left out. And, a lot of these women sort of become substitute mothers. Wallis was a substitute mother for Edward. Fergie, to a large extent, is a sort of mother a bit for Andrew. And I think she took on that role. They're a pretty dysfunctional family. The parenting through the generations has not been very good. And so these outsiders can come in and if they show them attention, they can be very quickly taken within the bosom. But we have, a contrast here between William and Harry. William married a very sensible woman from a very stable background, and he has found, I think, contentment and a very happy family life, and a very supportive extended family. And the Middletons haven't put a foot wrong. I'm afraid Harry got involved with another dysfunctional family, we're now seeing all those problems begin to emerge.
That is actually, because that there's a lot of debate about the kids. I mean, I don't trash the kids or anything like that, but I did reach out to the palace, and I said, can you please tell me, because, we always get the easel out with the names of the doctors and everything, because that information has to be made public to assuage the public that those children legitimately belong in the line of succession, that they meet the legal requirements. So I phoned the palace and I said, you know what, because I'm Canadian. So I would like to know where the child was born and who the doctors are. Can you please give me that information? So they said to me, well, because this has to do with the line of succession, we refer you to submit an FOIA to and they sent me the email, which I did, Andrew. And you know what? They wrote back to me that they're not a hospital. This is the FOIA. I have that email. I even did a video about it, that they're not doctors that don't deliver children. And because the monarchy is not really a public body per se, they're not bound by the same rules of FOIA. So they urged me, and I responded to
the royal family are exempt from freedom of information.
The monarchy.
Yeah. So I agree. I mean, this is where, it's ridiculous, because, I mean, this is, I mean, we're paying for them. I mean, part of the deal is that they need to be a little bit more open. And as you say, in the past, this information was publicly available. But I'm afraid they will use any way they can to deny people information, and they're protecting, and I think the problem is that this creates a vacuum for speculation and fantasy. Why not just say if the children are theirs and it was all done properly, why not just give these details? So you have to wonder why the secrecy.
Yeah, and for example, I've requested many times, because they gave the details for Lily, right, the girl. So I requested Andrew 7 times. Well, now 8, 8 times. But in the 7th, I got an email back from them and say, please verify the details, because they don't refund you the money, right? This is why they ask you to always verify the details, right? So I submitted the details, and they got me an email, and they said, you know what, if you can get other documents, because in California, there is no record of a child being born with the details you provided, which are the details that Meghan Markle provided and that the royal family have provided. And then they urged me to go to Santa Barbara directly, where they think that the child was born, because maybe they will have some documents there. But they at the same time, they tell me it's highly unlikely, because if this child was born in 2021, it should be on the records, we should have access to that. So, and they offer not to charge me for the 8th time I asked for the thing, and it's not that they said to me, we don't have it, because I did ask for a copy of the birth certificate of a famous person that I know they weren't going to be able to give me, because they have a court order. And sure enough, they responded, due to the court order number, blah, 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 we cannot provide you those details, but they give you the reason why. But in this case, they tell me that there's no record of that child in the state of California in their main records. And it's something that is really annoying me, because being in the line of succession has constitutional consequences. I mean, Harry's not that far off.
Well, I mean, I think, they should be addressing this question, because it's clearly raised a lot, particularly on social media. And they would be wise to address it. So you're right. There are a lot of unexplained elements to the birth of the children. You're right too that the succession line is important, but Harry is now moved. I think is he 9th now?
No, Harry's 5th.
Oh, 5th. Okay, 5th. 5th. Sorry. So. But they're then what? They are 6th and 7th. So it's very unlikely, unless the Walesers get aircraft goes down.
But that's another thing. That's another thing, Andrew, that the Queen was really angry with Prince William, because he flies in the helicopter with his entire family.
Yes, no, I think that is a concern.
I kid you not.
Always the rule that they would travel separately. Yeah.
Yeah, but he goes with the whole family. The whole family, the 5 of them go. And I think somebody online said that Meghan said we're only a plane crash away from becoming King of England. But and there's something that fascinated me that you talked about with Andrew Lownie, that apparently Andrew contemplated being regent.
Yes, they had this mad idea when Charles was very unpopular because of the problems in his marriage, and Fergie and indeed Diana thought that Andrew might be the regent figure until William came of age. And we've got to remember that, Andrew was quite a popular figure,
I know.
particularly in the 80s. He was the war hero. He was good looking. We didn't really know a lot of things we do know about him now. And so, that was just a wild idea. I don't think it was ever going to happen. But that was an idea that they had. And it was one of the reasons why Fergie and Diana both hung in there, in the belief that, certainly Fergie hung in there, and that their husband might be king.
But why would they think that they had a chance to even be regent to begin with? I mean, why would they think that would be a possibility?
Well, I mean, Fergie has a lot of weird ideas. She had this idea that John F. Kennedy Jr. would fall in love with her, and he would win the White House, and she'd become First Lady. So she has a lot of strange fantasies, and that was just one of them.
Are you serious? She actually thought that?
And she stalked him in New York, and went to his hotel and tried to have meetings with him, and sent her assistant to watch him because he didn't come. He said he had another engagement, and she checked that he had an engagement. She was obsessed with him. She was obsessed at one point with Tiger Woods. I mean, she gets these obsessions.
But they're good looking men. I mean, did she really think she had a chance with these two guys? I mean, no offense, but I don't mean to be mean.
She's a woman of great confidence. Well, she's a woman of great confidence and also very low self-esteem. So it depends when you catch her.
Do you think that they will come back though? Because I see a lot of resurgence, and I've actually seen Fergie go around. And do you think? Because one of the things that really surprised me is the parallel between her and Meghan Markle. And the fact, and it's actually a worry, because if somebody like Fergie is now back in the fold, per se, that kind of implies, sends a message to Meghan that no matter what you do, you can always come back in the fold, because a lot of people are saying that Harry's contemplating coming back to the UK. Do you think that's a possibility? I mean, what are the parallels of that? I mean, and do you think?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. It does send out a message that they're weak, and that they will accommodate them. And Fergie's been in and out for 30 years. Whether she stays in or becomes even closer integrated, I'm a bit more skeptical about. I think particularly after my book comes out, I think people may have a slightly different view of her. But it does send out a message to Meghan, and I think they will push it. They'll call people's bluff, and we may well have Meghan coming back, because she's pretty shameless and is pretty thick-skinned. So she'll put up with people slightly ignoring her in royal circles and stuff. But they'll test the waters with their PR people. What they don't want is to be booed. But Harry's been, he's played the victim card, Diana's death and all these other things, and I'm afraid there are a lot of rather naive people who buy into the image that they project.
Your book on Andrew is coming next year, right? It's coming out. I can't wait. I can't. What do you have the title for the book, or are you still working on it?
The subtitle is The Controversial Lives of the Duke and Duchess of York. I can't reveal the title yet.
No, of course, but thanks for letting me know. Will you write a book about Harry and Meghan? Because they're a juicy topic, and there's so many secrets about Meghan Markle. That is. I actually had a gentleman who said he saw a sex tape here, and before Meghan actually got big with Harry or involved with Harry, apparently somebody from Canada, and he verified her. Well, I guess Meghan wanted to go the route of Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian, because I guess she was being running out of suits. So I figured the next best thing, if it worked for Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian, it would have worked for her. So he got a hold, they sent him the tape and he looked at it. But then by the time he thought about it, she suddenly was with Harry. So the same person called her and said, you know what, give me back. We're not going to go through with it, kind of thing. So will you write a book about them? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, there are some good books about them. I'm not sure I have the contacts to do that book. Lady Colin Campbell's just done a very good book. So I've got some other books I want to do first. I mean, I'm much happier dealing with documents, stuff that I can use to back up my stuff. Writing about contemporary people is a big problem, both in terms of access and libel. So it's much easier to write about dead people and weather documents.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, yeah, I know. It's. And what is your take? I'm really, I know. I'm very thankful for the time you give me. What is your take on this Harry and William and all this mess? I mean, do you think? I mean, King Charles. How do you think this is going to end with those? With that, I don't think William wants to have anything to do with Harry. But if Charles wants him back, will William have a choice, or how do you think see these things developing? Because it's actually quite sad.
Well, I think William and the King have come much closer over it. It's been a bonding experience. I think like a lot of family situations, the parent, the child the parent always loves the child. The siblings don't always love the sibling. So I think we're going to have a situation where William will keep his distance. I mean, they may be civil to each other, but I don't think he's going to forgive Harry for some of the things that were said about Kate and the way they behaved towards the monarchy. The king, I think, feels very hurt about what's been said about him and indeed about Camilla, but I think he's a more forgiving sort of figure. But who knows what's going to happen? I think if Meghan wasn't on the scene, it might be easier. And that was always the strategy, was to separate. I mean, the feeling is that marriage will not last, and that Harry may well come back to Britain, though his children will be in the States, without Meghan. And if you think about his visits, the visits generally to Britain have been without Meghan, in the way that Edward came back without Wallace.
Oh, that's true. That is so true. But something that really, you said that you think that Meghan would have no problem returning, because I think partly she'll feel she has the backing of the royal family, and she sees in Fergie, well, if they put up with Fergie, they can do it for me too. I mean, and they count on people having a short memory.
She's a narcissist and she has no empathy. So she's not going to be too worried about it. She can sail through all sorts of what we would find tricky situations and not be worried. So I think it's going to be more embarrassing for the royals having her there than for her to be there. She will feel that she's done nothing wrong and she's owed the apology, and she's in control. But you're absolutely right. The signals that are sent out are that they are weak. They've tried to be dignified. They've tried to in a sense, aim high, and the problem is it hasn't worked. So I think maybe they need to be a little bit more ruthless in dealing with them.
Have you? Sorry. No, have you have any, for example, and you're almost, have you finished writing the book, Andrew book, or you still have to go through more documents and stuff?
But there's a bit more work to be done. Yeah.
Do you think you will get access to that? Because Andrew happened such a long time ago. Do you think he might still face jail time if anybody comes over, or anybody comes out, or?
Well, I think there have been investigations into his behavior and a whole series of things, and the police have decided there wasn't a case to answer. And you've got to remember that no member of the royal family has ever been charged with a serious offence. So they'll find some way to ensure that even if he is guilty of crimes, that he's never charged. I think it's very unlikely he will travel to the States, because, of course, he's wanted for questioning there not as a guilty party, but as a witness to events. But I don't see him traveling to the States in the future. But who knows? Things may emerge. I mean, there is a statute of limitations, so we just don't know. I mean, there are many girls who have basically been paid off, but if some of those changed, decided to speak up and go to the authorities, there might well be new evidence that we just don't know, might lead to further investigations.
That is actually quite worrisome for Charles, especially because he's bringing him so publicly back into the fold. Oh, it's and you know what, my grandpa used to say the best problem is the one that you avoid. So having Andrew back with Sarah being so publicly walking the streets with the rest of the royals, that they're asking for trouble, because as you said, if there's still things that can come out, I would.
Well, if you think that what emboldened the Virginia Giuffre, that whole story had gone dead. She talked to the FBI, but there'd been a settlement. That whole thing was quiet. And what roused it was the picture of Epstein and Andrew in the park, but also Andrew's interview, which for Newsnight that got the whole thing going. Instead of brushing it under the carpet, or at least doing a proper damage limitation exercise, they did the worst thing possible, which was basically to fan the flames. And there may well be people who are prepared to come forward with stories that will, not enhance his reputation.
That is
absolutely worrying.
No, I can imagine, and now they have Meghan with Harry, because Harry must have juicy secrets or whatever. It doesn't show in Spare, because in Spare is pretty much, I think to me, is just a bunch of lies put together, and it's some sort of, I think he's paranoid. I don't know if his drug use has impaired his thinking, but that is an embarrassing book. That's not even anything that you can say, wow, we've heard secrets, because it's basically Meghan talking about a lipstick. Catherine didn't lend her the lipstick or whatever. It is so vain, so shallow, so nothing. But it must be a nightmare. That I can imagine Harry telling her a lot of stuff, whether it's true or not. And I can imagine her, if he divorces her doing the talk show circle.
Yes, she'll be on Oprah just like Fergie.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you remember that, because nobody, I can't find that interview anymore. Is that online?
Oh, that's interesting. Well,
it's gone.
She's given several interviews to Oprah, and she's a friend of Oprah, and there's been financial relationships with Oprah. Oprah produced one of the series of programs called Finding Sarah. Yeah. So Oprah is certainly not independent.
It is actually a whole thing of disgusting. I hope you can come back some other time, because so much to talk. And by the way, guys, please go to his podcast, subscribe, buy the Trader King Mountbatten. I want to talk to you about Mountbatten, because I'm a huge Mountbatten thing. And I think he was a nasty person, and the things that you get into with the Mountbattens, it's you need like a proper drink when you talk about the Mountbattens, in my humble opinion, when you're talking about them. So please go subscribe to Andrew, to his podcast. He's amazing. And hopefully, he'll come back some other times to talk about the Mountbattens.
Yes, we have to come back. Well, let's talk again when the book is out.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait. So when do you think the book is going to come out?
It should be out by this time next year.
Ooh, well, I hope you come back before and we talk about the Mountbattens. I'm actually going to buy the Mountbatten book and I'm going to read it. I read The Trader King. Oh my God, I don't know who your sources were, but oh my God. We should do like a little live and talk about that, because it is so telling. It is so telling. I don't even know why they didn't hang the Duke of Windsor for treason, but that's another topic for another,
That's one of the big questions. Yes. Right? They covered that up very carefully.
They did. So thank you for coming.